Hey everyone, it's Chris from Chris Beat Cancer, and today I am talking with my friend Dr. Sunil Pai. Now, Dr. Sunil Pai is someone that I met a few years ago because we both were involved with The Truth About Cancer, and we met a couple years ago at one of their events, and then I really got to know him well last October at the Truth About Cancer Ultimate Live Symposium in Dallas. And I had no idea how much I would like him until I got to know him and how much we had in common, and I don't agree with everybody that's involved with The Truth About Cancer. There's a lot of different opinions out there, and there's a handful of people that are involved that I just think are awesome, and Sunil Pai is one of them. So he's the author of this book, An Inflammation Nation, and he is an MD, and he is the founder and medical director of San Giovanni Lifestyle Medicine Center. Did I say that right?
Integrative Medicine Health and Lifestyle Center.
Integrative Medicine Health and Lifestyle Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So, and he also formulated Bosmeric, which is my favorite turmeric supplement brand. It's got turmeric, frankincense, ginger, and black pepper in it. We'll talk about that later. But Dr. Pai blew my mind in a conversation we had in Dallas. And then I read his book, and it blew my mind even more, if that makes sense. Especially when it comes to supplement manufacturing. Just get ready, because he's about to blow your mind too. So anyway, how's that for an intro? Is that good?
That's great. I appreciate it.
Cool, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Doing well. Okay, so the first question is, we got to start with, I kind of want people to understand how you became an integrative MD, because even though the word integrative MD is becoming more popular, most MDs are very conventional, and they're only interested in prescribing pharmaceutical drugs, right? Or surgical procedures, for example. So, what's different about you?
Sure. So one of the differences, I was in the first class, one of the first classes of formally being trained in integrative medicine at the University of Arizona with Dr. Andrew Weil, almost now 17 years ago. So this was way early, before people really understood what the word holistic or integrative was. That term right now is used very loosely in the industry. Everybody says that they're holistic or integrative, but there's a form of fellowship training that I underwent, and that, even to get into the fellowship training at that time, it was unknown, because I had this interest of doing something integrative or holistic, starting since my middle school years. I was exposed to my grandparents who used to practice what I understand now, but I didn't understand then, is Ayurvedic medicine in our home. And they also did a lot of lifestyle behaviors that we like to teach now, like meditation and yoga, and using a lot of herbal remedies or herbal medicines, Ayurvedic medicines. Now we understand what they were, but I didn't at that time. And it really led me to do other things, such as research, when I went into college, of learning about natural therapies. And in fact, I was the first person to publish worldwide the antifungal effects of garlic extract for automycosis, which is a fungal infection of the ear. And it was actually published in the Letters of Applied Microbiology. It's a very respected microbiology journal, and it was picked up by the Lancet and the British Medical Journal, the editorial reviews, because it was something that was very cheap and economical, that did better than the pharmaceutical drugs. And interesting thing is, I also learned a little bit about the natural supplements industry. So let me just give you an example of why I jumped into understanding natural products. Because
before you tell that story, you got to talk about your grandparents.
Sure. So just real quick, when I was a teenager in my middle years in middle school.
By the way, my cat has joined us.
Yeah, I saw that. Hi, cat. So when I used to come home from school and I'd bring my friends over, and everybody's kind of was in the goth phase at that time, and some alternative music and stuff like that. My grandmother would be chanting, she'd be in meditative states, or my grandfather would be standing on his head doing yoga. And at that time, I didn't understand what that was. I didn't think that was something culturally specific. I thought that was something that you did as you got older. And so over time, I learned that no, that was just my grandparents, and many other people, my friends' grandparents, weren't doing those things. But it really led me to learn a little bit more as I got older. What was my cultural roots, and what are the traditional medicines that had they been using for thousands of years, and that's kind of led me to getting more involved into integrative medicine. And so when I got to do this study, just real quick about the garlic, is that when I was writing a research proposal for funding to do my study, I wrote to all the pharmaceutical drugs companies and also all the natural supplement companies at that time, because it says, hey, they want to prove their product. So interesting thing is, everybody turned me down at the time. even the natural supplement
No
companies.
surprise that the pharmaceutical manufacturers turned you down.
Pharmaceuticals don't want to see anything that was better, but even the natural ones. And since I was using a garlic extract, I wrote to the most famous, I won't name them, but the most famous garlic extract companies, which you'll probably know about, aged concentrated garlic extracts, etc. They've been around for 20, 30 years or more. Maybe for cardiovascular health has really good data, but when we actually looked at the antifungal effects of even those, they didn't have any efficacy. So certain supplements and certain natural ingredients, depending on how fresh, the state, or the concentration, or how it's extracted, makes all the difference in therapeutic effects. And so, although it might be good for heart health in terms of fighting a fungal infection, had no activity. But what we did is that we ended up showing that fresh garlic extract, crushed, put into the coconut oil, actually did better than the pharmaceuticals, and obviously did better than the natural supplements. So it proved why we've been using this for thousands of years worldwide. And it got picked up by the British Medical Journal and the Lancet. It was published in the Letters of Applied Microbiology. So it was really kind of a big jump in my career, because I was learning a little bit about how can we use natural medicines but for conventional approaches. That led me to look at, when I was in medical school, to do rotations with Andrew Weil Clinic. And then I was I was resident, I did rotations, and then eventually the fellowship program came up, and I was the first one to apply. And luckily I was the first one in the country, and the youngest at the time actually, to do an integrative formal training. And so I'm really proud that 17 years later, I was in it early, and I've learned so much since then. Going to India, studied with, I studied 2 years with Deepak Chopra. My partner Maureen, who's going to be at the Costa Rica retreat. She used to run the Chopra Center for 6 years with Deepak. So we went to India. We learned a lot about Ayurvedic medicine in depth at my hometown in the medical schools there, the treatments like panchakarma, the detoxification, and really understanding meditation yoga from a medical perspective. Like, they actually prescribe these things in certain therapies and certain diseases, and they have wonderful outcomes. After I did that kind of training, I came back. I did my acupuncture training through Stanford. I did my nutrition through Cornell. I'm plant-based, as you know, as well, since 2007 or 2009. And then, physiological regulating medicine, functional medicine, you name it, I've done it. Because these are things that, back in 2000, 2002, people didn't hear about these things. But to me, it was learning as much as I can. So when we integrate, we're totally integrating as many modalities to improve outcomes. It's never about saying this is better than that. In our clinic, what we do is we look at how do we take the patient's condition and their diagnosis and improve that outcome from everything that's possible that we know in the scientific literature.
Yeah, I love that, man. It's like, it was when I was diagnosed, which was December 2003, right? And 2004, in early 2004, I mean, the internet was not helpful. I mean, I couldn't find anybody out there to help me, and especially integrative MDs. I mean, there was a local guy who was barely integrative, and he was about to retire, and he did vitamin C IVs for me, which was amazing. But now, I mean, to hear like all these amazing credentials you have, disciple of Dr. Andrew Weil, and working with Deepak Chopra and all this kind of stuff, it's like, I know people are going to get excited. Your phone's probably going to start ringing off the hook, man. Just get ready. You might need to hire an extra, receptionist or something. But
sure.
But anyway, you touched on something that you made me want to ask you. With the garlic study,
right?
Was the coconut oil important?
Yeah, so here's the thing that I learned even in retrospect. At that time, and this is 1995, okay? So again, this is even pre-internet, at least where I'm at.
Oh yeah, man, I was not on the internet in 95.
We didn't actually have organic, raw, virgin coconut oil available. And in fact, all it was hydrogenated coconut oil, okay, commercially made with solvents. Okay, and that's what we used to, and then remember that's what coconut oil got a bad name and it got a bad rap, and then towards the end of the 90s it got basically taken out of the field as a bad, dangerous heart danger kind of fat. But in fact, in India, when they're using the fresh, and now that we actually can use the fresh coconut, especially when it's organic virgin coconut cream, it actually has antimicrobial properties. Now that's been demonstrated in vitro and in vivo studies by itself. Okay?
Yeah, like lauric acid, right?
Yeah, and a lot of other compounds, and that's why. But the garlic itself has its own. The allicin in there is antifungal and antibacterial, and it's only through the fresh So when we did the studies, it had to be crushed immediately, and then we would do this kind of special way of kind of like flash freezing it and using it with the coconut oil. We didn't find the coconut oil at that time to have the effects because it was the wrong type. We didn't know that at that time. But with the garlic is that anything that was longer than a couple of hours old, that there was a degradation in terms of the activity. And so fresh was, that's why we like to have fresh live food rather than frozen or microwaved or processed, because we're losing some of these live compounds that will help us. So when people get sick, they go, oh, I got a cold or a flu. And that's why we're trying to eat more fresh garlic, have more. We want that fresh for that medicinal power or the efficacy of that. But where other times might have it in aged garlic extract for cardiovascular health. So there's different ways to use these herbs as medicines, but we have to distinguish that. Otherwise, people won't get the benefits.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So, some basically what you're saying is that some compounds stay active, but others lose their potency over time when we're talking about supplements.
Correct.
And yeah. So, and I get questions about supplements all the time. And I just, have a Square One program that I released recently. And of course, a lot of people tuned into it, and there's a supplement module, and I list a few that I feel like are key, and one of them was Bosmeric, which we'll talk about. But I still get questions all the time. What about this supplement? What about that one? What this and that? And I think people get they're too easily enchanted, I guess, by the quick fix mentality of a supplement, right, for their problems. When a lot of times they need to make a hardcore change, right? A hardcore diet change, hardcore lifestyle change, break their bad habits, and things like that. And so.
If I may interject, what I appreciate about your Square One program is that it wasn't just a supplement module of one. That was one of many of, say, 10 series of that. These are things that you have to do. Same with my book. I have 10 steps. Like, you have to do all 10 steps if you want to achieve optimum health. You want to prevent or reverse a chronic disease or even beat the cancer. It's not, again, just a magic pill or a magic supplement or even a magic conventional drug or a therapy. It's this lifestyle changes you talked about. And that's why I think we get along and we resonate, because it's demonstrating it's not just, again, one magic bullet. It's like you need to take this change and apply to all these varieties of factors, from what you eat, what you breathe, what you put in your skin, what you put in your home, what you put in your mind, what you put in your community, what you put in your spiritual faith. I think it's a combination of all those things that lead to optimum health.
Yep, I agree. Can you hear the train?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, I forgot. We need to plug the Costa Rica event.
Sure.
So I should mention that for people watching. Dr. Pai and I and our friends Theo and Kim Hansen will be in Costa Rica April 27th through May 1st, and the event is called Cancer Unplugged. CancerUnplugged.com. You can go there to learn more. But if you're interested in coming and hanging out with us for a week and learning how to, eating amazing food and just getting your mind expanded with knowledge, then you should come, right? Look it up and find a way to get down to Costa Rica and hang out with us. So anyway, that's coming up very soon. Dr. Pai will be there. I'll be there. And now Kim and Theo were my last interview. So if you missed it, Kim, they healed her breast cancer with nutrition. It's an amazing story. And anyway, tune into that interview and check it out, and you'll see how cool and special these people are, and why you'll want to come down and hang out with us down there. So now let's talk about some of the principles in your book specifically that are, because you have a very different attitude and position about diet than most MDs and most integrative MDs.
Right.
Which is why we get along so well, I think.
Right. Well, because the difference is that we're evidence-based and they're not.
Okay.
And so there's a really core understanding of value of what's fact and what's fiction. And sometimes, a lot of things that we learn about diet goes against what we may have as decades or generations of information that was presented to us by industry or by educational marketing materials from certain groups that wanted to sell us a product, a food group, for example. And we all learned certain pyramids and certain foods that's what we needed. And so we just took that to be self-evident that was the actual data that was truth. And now that when we look at evidence-based, the right type of diet, the diet that everybody should be eating or moving towards is a whole foods, organic, plant-based diet. And there's no qualms or no discussion about that. The evidence is there. The evidence to not eating that is not there, meaning the evidence to eat more of a paleo or a ketogenic or any kind of a high animal protein diet. There's little to no studies, if anything, but yet there's almost 100 studies published a day, I think now, 100,000 in a year that is being published on nutrition and plant-based diets. So it's almost overwhelming to keep up, and that's why with who we work with and other organizations, nonprofit organizations, we're trying to provide nutritional facts and real data so that people can kind of decipher what's on the internet, what's on Facebook, what's kind of been marketing, and a lot of these things are myths that carry through. And even before I went plant-based in 2009, I also believed in many of those things because we get it in school, we get it in medical school, we get it in the hospital, and then you get it at the gym. So it's kind of like anywhere or the health food store. And the idea is that where did these people get their information, and where so I'm the type of person where we go back to look at those studies, we look at what is the claim, and then can they back it up. And so the data will say everybody needs to be eating an organic, whole foods, plant-based diet. Really, we're looking at an anti-inflammatory diet, a diet that's full of phytonutrients that you only get from plants, antioxidants, which really predominantly only comes from plants, very little from the factory farming food, fiber, which only comes from plants, and protein as well. So we need all four, and that's where we're trying to shift people. In my book, I talk about other aspects of the standard American diet in terms of what I'm a little bit more controversial or known is investigating the food industry. Because a lot of people, as you know, Chris, we're always trying to eat healthier. Sometimes we go out our way to pay a little bit more for, this or that. And are we really still getting what we think? And, my book's kind of an eye-opener. It's like on every food group, from plants to the animals and in between. A lot of times the industry is kind of cheating people or misleading people in getting what they want.
Yeah, when money's involved, then it leads people to misrepresent the facts in order to sell more products, right?
Right.
So it is exciting to see how much plant-based nutrition science is coming out. I mean, it's just so cool because I think we are approaching a tipping point where, we're just going to see a massive shift in the diet habits, the dietary habits of people. Which is good because so many of our modern diseases are caused by our Western diet, by a diet that's loaded with meat, dairy, and processed food.
Right.
And getting back to, like you said, a whole foods, plant-based diet, tons of fruits and vegetables, just food from the earth, raw and cooked, right? Every day makes a huge difference in your health. And I think, but I grew up just like you. I mean, we're close in age and, everywhere you go, every restaurant, meat is the central portion, part of the menu. Like every option is a meat option, and usually it's a meat and dairy option.
Right.
But things are getting better. So like now you can get vegan options at restaurants and things. So it's cool to see it improving for sure.
And it's not only that, like in my book, what I talk about is like, where are we standing as a culture in America in terms of its overall health parameters? And we're at the bottom of the barrel. We're, in all chronic diseases. And, a lot of the statistics that I say in my book is shocking because people, if you ask them, where are we ranking right now in terms of healthcare and outcomes, everybody's going to think about at least we're in the top 10 or top 5 or top 3, and we're not. We're actually now ranking from all chronic diseases A through Z, meaning from asthma to cancer to diabetes to obesity to mood disorders or blood pressure problems. We're 46 out of 48 industrial nations. So we're at the bottom of the barrel. Now, we spend trillions of dollars, right? So we're spending this enormous amount of our GDP for healthcare, but we're not getting that outcome. We're really good at the acute care. In my book, I'm really thankful for emergency room and trauma care and all those things. But outside that emergency room, if you're able to walk into a clinic, you probably are not going to get a better outcome. You probably would be better if you were in another country right now. And so we have to look at, from an integrative perspective, what would you be getting or what would you be doing if you were in France or in Europe or in England, or if you're in South America or Africa or India or any of these other countries that are doing better than us. It's not saying it from an ego perspective. It's looking at, well, they're a healthier population. Why can't we be that healthy like we used to be?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you even say like we used to be, but even 100 years ago, Americans weren't very healthy. 100 years ago, Americans were not nearly as healthy as the rural Africans. 30 and 40 years ago, from Dr. Dennis Burkitt's studies. But so talk to me about some of the therapies and the way you approach a cancer patient when they come in your clinic, and some of the things that you do. And obviously, it's not one size fits all, but just some of the things that you found to be the most beneficial, and that kind of like your starting point for patients when they come into your office.
So first we start off with the diet, right? So obviously moving to the plant-based diet, but more importantly, since that's a lifestyle change, and sometimes it's very difficult because when I say someone who's either really young or more importantly who's a little bit on the senior side, maybe 60, 70 years old, they've been eating one way for 60, 70 years. It's a little bit difficult to say, hey, stop eating this when that's all they know. So what we like to look at from an immunological perspective is which foods out of all the food groups is actually triggering an inflammatory response in their body. So we do specialized testing to look at different types of inflammatory reactions, one that happens within an hour of consuming a food, one that can happen a few hours up to 4 days later from consuming a food. So someone can actually have a sensitivity to a plant like wheat or corn or soy or even kale, for example. And so the idea is that when we're changing people's diets, we want to make sure that everything that goes into that person's body is supportive in nature. It's an anti-inflammatory, and it's reducing, the ills that might be coming upon that person, and actually supporting that mechanisms of healing. And so it's nice because then when we take away some of these triggers instantly, within 2 weeks, whatever their inflammatory problem, even if it's not just cancer, but colitis or, chronic fibromyalgia or heart disease, diabetes, those conditions get better very quickly because whatever food that's triggering the inflammation in that individual is now gone. So then when they take an anti-inflammatory, say like Bosmeric SR or anything else, and we help get their immune system up with vitamin D and the glucans and stuff like that, the body can heal very fast. So our first approach is the diet. Then we look at inflammatory triggers. Then we look at detoxification. So, a lot of these people have horrible, history of taking multiple drugs. The average person I see is taking about 8 to 12 pharmaceuticals just on average. That's an average, not a cancer patient, just an average patient. An average VA patient, unfortunately, is up to 26 prescription drugs.
I can't even imagine that. 26
right? So you can imagine how many side effects
and
then drugs that are treating the side effects and et cetera.
Yeah.
And that's why they're not healthy. So it's not about, we're giving cheaper medications. It's like, no, we need to be resolving the disease rather than trying to manage the disease. And that's our approach, is resolution, not management. Okay. And so we look at detoxification. So when we look at certain nutrition testing, okay, we look at vitamins and antioxidants. We look at glutathione and alpha lipoic levels. We look at, your omega-3s. We look at metabolism and saying, are you metabolizing? So even if you're eating a perfect diet, or even if you're taking dietary supplements, is your body utilizing it? Because sometimes you might have a deficiency in one area and your omega-3s are going in the wrong pathway. You're getting more prone. So you might be vegan, for example, but if you have a deficiency in some of the B vitamins or zinc or vitamin C, for example, you might push a metabolic pathway to become more pro-inflammatory, even though you're not eating pro-inflammatory foods. So the idea is that we're learning how to improve your overall metabolic function. And if there's dysfunctions in detoxification, then there's certain natural things, even in the diet, we will recommend you need to eat more of these foods to help those pathways. Supplements only supplement the diet. They never replace the diet. So the idea is that we try to find the deficiencies first and then replenish those, and then obviously then transition over to eating a more specific diet. So the other thing that we always recommend is not smoking. Now, it sounds funny to you and me, but believe it or not, how many people I see that are smoking that still have cancer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's,
man.
Or still smoking today, and they know, like, with all the data now that we know, 100 years later, how many people die every year with cancer-related deaths or chronic diseases due to smoking. So we eliminate the smoking. And then we look at things like, removing the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories from the diet. So no ibuprofen, Motrin, Advils, Aleve, Tylenols, those things, shifting them over to natural things like the Bosmeric, looking at immune system functioning. So things like vitamin D, glucans, exercise, meditation, stress reduction, community involvement, spirituality. These are all parts and, part and parcel of healing. And so you can't have one without the other. And how we make everything kind of work synergistically is by that comprehensive approach.
If someone comes into your clinic and you do a food sensitivity test, do you use the ALCAT test or something different?
We do something different.
Okay.
In fact, and so let me clear that up, because that's going to be a very popular question that you'll get. When we're evidence-based, we like to look at if a laboratory is doing a test, then it should be verified third-party outside that own laboratory's testing. Okay. And some of these tests, I won't mention it, you mentioned, but some of these testing companies have proprietary methods that nobody else outside that laboratory can verify. If I can't verify it outside that laboratory, it's just like someone with a supplement saying, well, it's magical, it's proprietary, but if you can't study it or you can't let anybody else study it, then I don't put any credibility into that. We like to split out the reactions of the immediate, the IgEs and the IgG4 specifically, and not combine them. So we get really specific and higher sensitivities and specificities in relating to the patient what they should eat or not eat. Because remember, when we're taking away foods, it's really difficult because it might be a food that they like, or it might be a food that we think that they should be eating also.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
right. It's
we want to
normally
be,
healthy.
yeah. And so we really want to be as specific as possible to get them the biggest bang for their buck, because lifestyle change is difficult
Yeah.
and it takes time and effort. And you said you got to get all in on it. So we want to make sure that we're not just saying, oh, I got this test and, just don't eat these foods. We want to be very specific, the type of reaction and the severity of those reactions. I look at it like this. It's not about being perfect. It's about being realistic, but getting realistic goals of getting better also.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that because I had the ALCAT test done, and it's an interesting story. I don't know if I've ever told this publicly. So I had this test done. It's a food sensitivity test. I just was curious. Like a couple of years ago, I was feeling kind of run down. It was about this time of year in winter. My vitamin D levels are probably low. And, and I'd been bitten by a tick a few months before that. And I was like, I don't know, man. Am I getting Lyme disease? I'm not feeling great. So I had a food sensitivity test, and it came back, and there was a list of foods that I was supposedly really sensitive to that were, causing inflammation or whatever. And so I eliminated all those foods. And in less than a month, there was kind of a mix-up. And the test they did was not the full comprehensive test. Right. So it only included like 100 instead of 500 different food compounds, right? So I went back to my practitioner and I was like, hey, I actually want the full-blown test. Like I want everything. So we ordered it again, less than a month, and it comes back, and the results were the exact opposite. They were the opposite.
Right.
The foods it says I was sensitive to in the beginning, it was now saying I could eat.
Right.
And the foods it was saying I should eat, it was saying I shouldn't eat. And I'm like, oh man, this is not good. There's a problem here.
So, and I can explain some of that. Some of it's the testing. The other thing is that when they're mixing the types of reactions of the body, some of the things that are delayed, which we call the IgG4s, which happens a few hours up to 4 days later again. Those are not permanent reactions. Those are just temporary, where the body at that time doesn't like it. So through avoidance and rotation, you can actually introduce those foods. The IgEs are pretty stuck. Those are the stronger type of reactions, which are a little bit more powerful in terms of the reaction of getting the inflammatory response. So the E's are pretty stuck. I mean, they should test positive. But when they mix these kind of tests, then you're not getting really definitive answers. And again, then you get frustrated because you say, hey, I just ate all this stuff. I removed it. Now it says I can't eat it. You're not really sure. Then you're even more frustrated. Then you're trying to go plant-based, even a little bit more frustrating. Our goal is to really, really get it defined to be individualized. So we're trying to individualize. So we know that plant-based diet will always have the evidence better than animal protein diet. But now how do we give your immune system its role in looking at why not I should be eating these foods?
I'm glad you said that, because I know people watching, some of them might be thinking like, oh no, I don't know what to eat now, right? And
right.
The plant-based diet is always an improvement,
sure.
right?
Always.
Even if you don't have access to this kind of testing at the moment,
right.
Just get rid of the animal products, cut them way back or out completely. Obviously, cut out the processed food, the junk food. Stop smoking. Stop chewing tobacco.
Right.
If you're an alcoholic, you're poisoning yourself. You got to get the foundation in place first, and then you can refine it.
Right. And one thing just also to let you know about testing is that in our clinic we don't make money on testing. Okay, so there's a whole gamut here in this whole holistic functional kind of growth of practitioners, is that they'll sell a test that you may have gotten, and the practitioners, doubling, tripling the cost. And, a lot of people, when they go to a non-MD, they don't mind paying that money because they think that's how it's going to work. I'm going to see a chiropractor. I'm going to see some kind of naturopath. So they already expect they're going to spend thousands of dollars on testing. But in fact, we look at it differently. We're a nonprofit. We don't look at making money on tests. I want people to save their money and put it in therapies. Go out and, we have a local co-op that delivers organic food from the farm to their door. I mean, I want people to spend money on treatments and therapies and foods that get them better, not that I just got a test and now they don't even know how to cook or eat or chop. So there's a little bit of just letting you know. There's, so I was asking what, one of the questions, like you said, you had a wonderful program was like, these are the 20 questions that you ask your oncologist, or questions ask your oncologist. So now it's also asking your integrative doctor, do you make money on tests? That's a great thing to ask, because if you do, then it's like, okay, well then once you get that test, how much are they going to be involved in actually helping you with the guidance, or did they just order and say, okay, here's your results, don't eat that? Well, then what am I still supposed to do? We help people. We go shopping with them. We have cooking classes. We provide them all sorts of information on how to make foods, quick foods. You don't have to be a chef. And for example, we even tell them simple devices that they can use, like rice cookers, or different things that they can use, that they can interestingly make foods that are healthy, organic, natural, but they also don't have to spend all day in the kitchen.
Yeah. Talk about some of the integrative therapies that you have at the clinic.
So, again, Panchakarma is one of our specialties. Panchakarma is the original detoxification program through Ayurvedic medicine. Conventionally, a lot of people think of, a colon cleanse. I got this product, from the health food market. It's a 7-day colon cleanse, pretty much a fiber supplement.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, Ayurveda, which is, the word detoxification, Panchakarma comes from the 5 cleanses. It's about cleaning, the whole body. So there's a variety of body techniques like massages and therapies that we use specific oils that have been, we actually formulate for the patient based on their mind-body constitution, or what they call it, dosha. And in fact, in our program in Costa Rica, Maureen will go and she's going to teach a little bit of Ayurvedic medicine, and also teach you how to know what your mind-body type is, and also how to eat towards that. So it's a little bit, now we're going to a further level of how to learn about balancing your mind-body type by certain foods. So we're going to keep kicking it up a notch so that people can go and get healthier, and even, to that level of optimum wellness. So Panchakarma is something that we do. It's a total body cleanse, the full body. So it's not just, some kind of product of that. We also do things like, so we also do sound therapies. We do a lot of yoga. We do a lot of massage. And then I do something called neuroacupuncture. So depending on the patient, for neurological conditions, it's great. So it's a special techniques. This is more for people that have like stroke, Parkinson's, MS, those kind of things like that. And, that's pretty much what we do from that. We don't do IV therapies. We're not like an invasive clinic that way. We're a lifestyle center. So I try to shift everything. And what I'm learning right now with some of the IV therapies that I've looked at in the past, that I've had personal experience with working with in some of these cancer clinics, is why they don't work as effectively as we would like, is because we're bypassing the gut microbiome in terms of orals. So that's where, like, when we look at, say, for example, Linus Pauling saying, vitamin C, vitamin C, vitamin C, he was taking these high doses orally, and then we kind of jump to IV. And the IV is kind of like, you'll see there's mixed bag of data. Like some people say, oh, it was great. Some people didn't do anything. And I was taking 50 grams, 100 grams for weeks in clinics, didn't get any better. It's because we're looking at now that the microbiome, the gut's microbiome, that's part of my book that I explain. Also, what we'll talk about it in the retreats, is that how the foods are transformed. It's not that just the food is just absorbed. Is that the certain foods act like key and lock mechanisms that when we introduce it into the gut, it will actually trigger cascades of other reactions that we don't necessarily have to measure in the blood that's causing the benefits.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Versus, there's a lot of things that have to happen but between a food item going in your mouth, between your mouth and your bloodstream. Right. And versus just going straight into the bloodstream.
Right. And I think we just jumped a lot of times in medicine because, here's a pharmaceutical drug, so we want to measure it in the blood. So when we took a food compound, we're saying, well, it wasn't really high in the blood, so let's try to either make it IV, but we now know that there's a missing link, and that's why nature's provided it as food, not necessarily, it didn't come off a tree in an IV bag, you know what I'm saying? So,
right.
But, again, food is medicine is key. We just need to learn how to take it, when to take it, how much to take it.
So let's talk about pharmaceutical supplement science.
Sure.
You and I have had some conversations, obviously, phone calls, and I guess we could start with Bosmeric, or maybe in turmeric in general.
Okay.
But explain to people watching what you explained to me about the efficacy of turmeric.
Sure. So let's just first
supplements,
Yeah. So let's just explain what was turmeric, and then what's the difference between turmeric and curcumin.
Sure.
So turmeric is the whole root, the rhizome of the root. Okay. And first of all, we always want it to be pesticide free or organic, because as a root crop, it's one of the most heavily sprayed things. So like turmeric and ginger, anything that's in the ground or even above ground now, right? Everything like berries and all, you want to get pesticide free or organic as possible. And what happens is curcumin is about 3 to 5% of turmeric. Okay. And what has been patented specifically, like what's in the Bosmeric, which is called curcumin C3 complex, is 3 curcuminoids specifically at specific ratios. Okay. Now that became 95% curcuminoids, right? Just in general, it's standardized to 95% curcuminoids. So a lot of people, after the patent was done, and this is the one that's been used most heavily around the world. We have over 20 years of use. It's GRAS affirmed by the U.S. FDA. Everybody else is not. We have over 50 human clinical trials, not just cell cultures and little test tube things in marketing, but over 50 human clinical trials. If we take all the other competitors, for example, and we lump them together, they have about 25 studies, and most of them are white papers, which are kind of like press releases. Okay, so even though you hear like always these newer ones, I'll talk about it in a second, but most of them don't pan out to be real. Okay, now when we take this 95% curcuminoids, a lot of companies would say, well, we will take a generic 95% curcuminoid extract and just throw it in our product. And so, if you look at most of the products in the market, I'll say, Yarrow 95, which is like standardized 95% curcuminoids, right? For example, that was one of the ones in the study. So just recently, last year, there was a study that was done that they were testing the anti-inflammatory aspects and immune benefits of what's in our product, the curcumin C3 complex, and 4 other 95% curcuminoids that are produced by major suppliers. One of them is one of the base suppliers to almost all the industry, okay? And what they found out is that the other 4 have little to no anti-inflammatory effect or immunological benefits. Now, people were kind of shocked because they said, well, but it doesn't have 95% curcuminoids. It's like, no, because what the patent is on the extraction of those type of curcuminoids in a specific ratio. It's not just the total amount. And this happens with all products. So when people say, for example, when we use bioprine, which is 95% piperine of black pepper, and everybody says, well, we'll just put black pepper extract in there. It's not going to have the same effect because what was patented is how those piperine compounds are extracted. It's not just in our product, but anything that's a patented, branded product. Remember, we cannot patent a natural ingredient because you can grow it in your yard. But what they can patent is the extraction processes and how they actually produce that. And that's what makes it so unique. But a lot of people are missing the efficacy. So people go, oh, I've been taking turmeric, it doesn't do anything. Or I take that. Doctors prescribe it all the time. It's one of the top 5 growing supplements in the market still, and it's projected to go even higher next couple of years because so much research. There's over 8,000 studies now on turmeric and curcumin, right? Ours, we have the highest amount of human clinical data. But the industry jumps from what was in a study and says it goes to the internet or the marketing companies, and they blow this out there. But the efficacy is not on those products. It's only on what we have.
So what's happening is a lot of, just in the curcumin supplement world, a lot of these supplement brands are borrowing the findings of research on C3 complex, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And they're applying it to their own product,
Sure.
in saying,
always,
this is what, so for example, there's a study that says curcumin is an anti-inflammatory, right?
Right.
And so they're like, see, and then they'll take the study on C3 and they say, see, it's an anti-inflammatory, so buy our product with curcumin in it. But
right.
The truth is, when their product studied, it doesn't work.
Right.
Right.
But remember,
or if they measure, here's what caught me. So I really fell into the nutraceutical marketing. I'm trying to think of a good adjective, but let's just
sure.
Over the years, I'm kind of a supplement geek, right? I'm always looking for like the best,
better one, right?
Most potent form of whatever.
New absorption, better, faster, quicker.
Yeah. So
everybody is, by the way, right? Why not?
Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, what's the best? Because obviously I have a blog, I have an audience, and people are like, what's the best? What do you like? So I'm always researching and trying to find out like really what is the best, highest quality, and the most potent and things. So yeah, and so I would see this research published by companies that make forms of curcumin, and
right.
one would be like 7 times more absorbable than
right.
standard curcumin. So I'm like, oh wow, like this product seems awesome. I'm going to take this now. So I'd take that for a while. Then I found this other one that's 27 times more absorbable. I'm like, whoa, well this is great. Like this must be the best ever. Right. And so
and then he goes to 69 times more, and then recently 185 times more absorbable. You're like, wow!
I haven't even seen those two.
Okay. So
explain what that actually means when they say it's more absorbable. Explain what they're doing in their research.
Yeah. So what they're doing is in a test tube, by the way. Okay. So this is not done in an animal study or in a human clinical trial. But what they're doing is in a test tube is they're measuring what we call metabolites of these curcuminoids. Okay. And so just like when you eat a compound, say if you eat an apple or kale, there's thousands of compounds that are broken up that are metabolized by the liver and the body and stuff like that. But in the test tube, we can look at a variety of compounds that are coming off of these in the dishes and in the test tubes. What we find out is that they're measuring what they call gluconides. Okay, and they can go to super high levels in the blood or in the test tube, for example. But we now understand that when we test those gluconides, okay, they don't have any physiological benefit, meaning there's no anti-inflammatory. In fact, one of the best researchers of curcumin and inflammation, who was formerly at MD Anderson, who did a lot of studies on these things, one of the cancer conferences, we had this discussion, and he actually demonstrated the research because they're like, wow, if that's a great compound, just like, the curcuminoids, we should be taking these other components and putting it in product or drugs. And they found out that it didn't. So more of something that doesn't work is just more of something that doesn't work at the end of the day. But it sounds great but what it really comes in from a manufacturing perspective, and I've been doing this now for 14 years in terms of manufacturing and supplement side, from farm to table to all the way to the clinical trial and patents, is that what it does to the companies, it provides them more margin. Right? Because we can give you less curcuminoids at the end of the day. Say it's so much more absorbable and they just have higher profits, but the patient does not get any more, if more importantly, less efficacy. And sometimes that actually can be even harmful, because what a lot of people don't realize is with most of the curcumin on the market, particularly the generic forms, we had an investigation last year where the largest supplier of generic turmeric extract and curcumin extract from India, 43% of the product was synthetically made. Okay, so it's made in a lab, like a chemical, like an aspirin kind of thing. Yeah. The other thing is that a lot of people don't realize is that how are those curcuminoids extracted, right? Are they using what kind of solvents? So a lot of people say, oh, your tablet has this ingredient, or something has this ingredient. They'll pick on something, and I'm like, but what about the solvent of your main product? How is that taken out? Do they have hexane solvents? Is there residual still in the product? And most of them still have it. They just don't tell you that, right? So you have to understand, just like a cheap cooking oil versus a cold pressed organic, coconut or olive oil, or you can get a cheap olive oil that's got solvents in there, believe it or not, right? They don't have to list it on the label. That's just how we know how they extract it. But most people are not aware of this kind of manufacturing process. They just go, oh, it says this on the bottle, and they go with that. So there's a huge range of not only efficacy, but more importantly, safety that it comes to that. And we have both. We have the most amount of safety studies and the most amount of clinical data.
So, and just to summarize what you said earlier, that in case cases went over anybody's head, because
Sure.
I've been thinking about this for a while, so
Sure.
I have a fairly decent grasp on it. But
Sure.
basically what these companies are doing is they're measuring the absorption of certain compounds, right?
Right.
Yes, some of these compounds are more absorbable, but they're
Right.
not necessarily the compounds that you want. They're not the anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer compounds.
Yeah, just
And
a byproduct.
that's really what blew my mind. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's 27 times more absorbable, but not the good stuff. You're not absorbing 27 times more of the good stuff.
Right. And remember, all of those things, even when they say more absorbable, then they have to then go to bioavailability is a path, it's not a destination. So just because they say it, then they say, well, how does that work now in the animal model? And even more importantly, how does it work in the human model? They don't have any of that. Okay, so it's just like I can show something in the lab that makes it so different than when you take it in your body. And for us, why we're so different, at least in our clinic and how I practice, is because I see patients every day. Right. And unfortunately, they're just as victims as the physicians, as they believe the marketing and they take the product, but they don't get better. And then they show up on my door. And if I say, well, here's a product that has this ingredient, they go, I think I took that. It didn't work. I'm like, well, you took the wrong kind, and that's why it didn't work. And it's hard for people to swallow because no one wants to feel that, we've been taken by marketing.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
So let's talk about talk about the specific ingredients in Bosmeric.
Okay, so Bosmeric has
and
four,
how it's manufactured, just all the interesting details, just.
So these ingredients are controlled, are grown on controlled farms, about 400,000 acres. Okay, and they pick the specific cultivar of each of those things. So the turmeric root, the boswellia that comes from the tree, the gum resin, the ginger, and the black pepper. Okay, so none of our ingredients are coming from world market. What I mean by that is most manufacturers, if I go to a company right now and say, hey, I Google supplement, companies, they're going to say, okay, we just buy product off a world market, meaning I look at turmeric, they'll look at turmeric, and they'll just say, who's the suppliers of turmeric? There'll be 100 people, some of them coming from China, India, other countries, and they're just going to buy it like by the kilos, in these big tubs, and it just has a little certificate. No, we follow it from the crop all the way to the shelf. Okay, so it's a vertical integrated process. So it's pesticide free, number one, which is really key. Okay, you want to make sure then we are extracting those curcuminoids, or in terms of the boswellia, which I'll talk about, all the right kind of components, and then even how we manufacture it is very unique. But we have 4 specific ingredients in Bosmeric, okay? So again, all of them coming directly from the farm, that's controlled. The right cultivar, meaning find the right species that has the right phytonutrient composition profile. Then there's a patented process of how that's even being extracted that no one else can do. And then we have even unique technology of how we even put it together. So the first ingredient is curcumin, right? So curcumin, and again, there's over 8,000 studies. My book has a full chapter on all the studies, how it blocks over 97 different mechanisms of inflammation. TNF alpha, NF kappa beta, COX and LOX enzymes. For the listeners, these are just all these different type of fire buttons or fire pathways, and we want to calm them down. Okay, we don't want to turn them off. We want to turn them down. Okay, so all these things that create a headache or back pain, any kind of itis. Remember, itis just means inflammation. We have 200 different itises, right? Conjunctivitis, rhinitis, sinusitis, thyroiditis, bronchitis, colitis, prostatitis, dermatitis, arthritis, you name it. Mm-hmm. We're looking at what is triggering the inflammation, and then how do we lower that naturally. So curcumin does that very effectively, okay? And in fact, in my book, for the patients that have cancer, for example, they can look at, there's a lot of research now where we're looking at using the C3 complex, for example, in our product at the right dose, and what we can give synergistically even with conventional oncological therapies. It's not running away from it. Some people, unfortunately, will have to make a tough decision, and in their position, they'll say, I'll have to take this type of chemotherapy, or I'll have to take this radiation, okay? They're not as lucky as you, have the research and the time and actually the will to jump in and change, but if they're in, sometimes you have to do that. But can we now make something more toxic, more targeted, and protect the healthier cells around? And now there's wonderful studies that are being done, and so I put all those things in my book. Like, these are the 13 different types of chemotherapies that the studies will show they do better when conjunction they used than separate. Okay, so this is the true integrative medicine. It's like some people have to do that, and some people want to do that, by the way. Some people say, I'm not going to change my diet. I'd rather just go get this. So I still have to help them get better. Okay, so curcumin C3 complex, can't speak enough benefits of it. Tons and tons of research. Okay, the second one is boswellia or frankincense, which most people now, it's kind of been popular recently with essential oils and this. But in boswellia, there's 3 important fractions that we have been able to patent and also extract correctly. Now, boswellia, actually the main components come from the gum resin of the tree. Unfortunately, when it comes to essential oils and other products, they're actually using leaves and other parts of the plant that don't have those components. Again, this is the industry. So people say, oh, I'm taking a boswellia extract. I'm like, wait, that's just like a food. You can take the skin, you can take the meat, you can take the core, you can take the seed.
The bark.
The bark, so the same thing. You have the plant, you can take the flower, the leaf, the tree, the root, and they all have different phytochemicals in there. But a lot of times on the product, they'll just say, this is the name, this plant, ginger root. Or what part of this ginger plant are you taking, for example? So the boswellia, there's 3 components. One of them is called boswellic acids, and that was a part that's most people were comparing to have strong anti-inflammatory effects. And then there's something that came out recently called AKBBA, another fraction. And more recently, we discovered something called polysol, which is a polysaccharide. And all that means is that when we take that out and we've patented it, then we can actually synergistically balance the rest of the plant. What we're trying to look at in nature is what is the most powerful ratios of these. So I'll give you an example. When I first started, it took 6 years to make Bosmeric. It's 6 years of R&D, believe it or not, okay? We did animal studies, cell culture studies. I mean, it took a long time because when we come from a Western pharmaceutical approach, we say, if I find this ingredient here, why don't I just turn it up to 10? Like you play guitar, I play guitar. So why don't I turn it to 11?
Yeah.
Maybe, it's going to sound a little bit better sometimes. But that's not necessarily true when it comes to using nutraceuticals or getting pharmacological benefits. So some companies would take this, even rightfully so. We would do studies where we take all these ingredients and turn it up as high as possible. And then we'd find out in the studies in the animals that the inflammation did not go down anymore. In fact, sometimes it didn't go down much at all. And so we have to then do these studies where we raise this one, we lower this one, we raise this one, we lower this one, and we find the right profile. And lo and behold, it's not always everything at the highest. There's specific ratios. So when we look at ours, you'll see it says 35% of the boswellic acids, 35% of the polysol, 10% AKBBA. It's not randomly selected there. It's specifically picked because that had the strongest effect overall, which then tells us that that cultivar, that kind of plant growing in that ratio would be the best to give, or the supplement, for example. Okay, so we're looking at efficacy. So Boswellia has hundreds and hundreds of studies. Again, remember the baby magi, the baby was brought, from the gift, as we call it. And so, turmeric, myrrh, and gold, right? Turmeric being the gold, myrrh being Google, and frankincense again. So there's this kind of Ayurvedic historical use of these herbs. So Boswellia has a lot of research, and it's really good for inflammation of lungs and brain. Okay, so it's really good when people have lung problems, asthma, allergies, those kind of things. And when we have a lot of people with different type of brain tissue problems, traumatic brain injuries, to even brain tumors. Very well research done. Then third ingredient is ginger, which we all know is a great gastroprotective agent, helpful for nausea. It's an anti-inflammatory. We've been able to take the component called gingerols, which is, again, like the curcumin part of the ginger, and we have it at 20%, which is the highest percentage available worldwide. I think the next closest is 11%. So we've really been able to increase that benefit of taking the ginger. And then we have the bioperine, which is the black pepper. Black pepper is not only anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, anti-everything by itself with the data, but it helps as a bioavailable enhancer. It helps absorb the other ingredients, okay? And in fact, with curcumin, it increases it 2,000% better absorption. But that study is only using curcumin C3 complex and the bioperine. You don't get that with generic black pepper extract and a turmeric extract, even though everybody likes to use that. 2,000% absorption doesn't happen. Okay.
That's true. I mean, you see people talking about. I see people talking about that all the time.
All the time,
online,
right?
That adding black pepper, which adding black pepper to curry powder, for example,
sure,
or to turmeric powder, certainly isn't going to hurt it.
No, and you want to improve. So why we put it in food is because it does improve the absorption of the food. But to say that it's going to do it that
2,000%, no,
that's not there. Okay, so that's why in Ayurvedic medicine we always put black pepper in all the formulas. Okay, and that's why we crush black pepper on our food so it improves the digestion and absorption of what we just ate. Okay, so that's a food as medicine. We're just now trying to make it more pharmacologically balanced because now we're trying to reverse diseases, right? We haven't been eating these foods like turmeric and boswellia or ginger as much as we should. And if I was in another culture like in India, they'd be eating 50 milligrams a day over their lifetime. They have the lowest dementia rates worldwide, attributed to just the small amount of turmeric in the diet. Now you and I, we just discovered this, recently later on in life. Now we're trying to reverse or prevent diseases, so we have to take a little bit higher doses and more kind of targeted effect. Eating it though, wonderfully to add in the diet. I always have people add the whole food into the diet as well. And
every single day I have at least a tablespoon of turmeric, of organic turmeric, and I actually put it in a fruit smoothie, which seems weird, but
I put it in coffee.
It works well. Yeah, it mixes. It works. It really mixes well with fruit.
Yeah, so I put it like the chai or the coffee that I drink, stuff like that. So it's, I mean, there's ways you can put in smoothies. You can put in the rice and beans. You can throw it in there, and
it's great on everything.
Everything. Okay.
Yep.
And then the interesting thing is
Except for
how,
ice cream.
aside of the unique ingredients and that the patents and the studies that we have and the efficacy, is how we put it together. Okay. So we have what they call a bilayered caplet. Okay. A caplet meaning smaller than a tablet, so it's easier to swallow. And you'll see that it's in two different layers. You'll see kind of the yellow and the brown layer. Why it's bilayered is because if you put any of these ingredients into a capsule, which is what the rest of the industry does, right? So you'll see tons of turmeric and boswellia products that will have bromelain, papain, proteolytic enzymes, nattokinase, ceratopeptidase, any of these.
And ginger.
And ginger together. When they put it in a capsule, what happens is those enzymatic processes of those other ingredients degrade the turmeric, the boswellia, or any other herbal ingredient in there as it sits in the capsule over time, right? So what we have to do is we're talking about efficacy here. I'm a physician. I need to give efficacy. And you need to have 100% of what you're taking at the time that you take it. Just like a drug. When it says this is how many milligrams in the pill, you take it. When you take it at the time, whether it's now or 3 months from now, it's exactly that amount. But on nutritional supplements, it's not that way. It degrades over time. Now, they might manufacture that a year and a half ago in the warehouse from New Jersey. Then by the time it gets to California on the truck, and then by the time someone goes buys it at the store, I mean, it's losing 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of the efficacy of that. Even if they started off with the right ingredients to begin with, it's just degrading over time. And that's why that's why we sell like individual spices. We don't really sell them as mixes. Okay.
Yeah.
Just to let you know. And we should always be changing those because they also, over time, if they're not stabilized, they lose this potency. Most people have really old spices in their pantry.
Right. And anyone can start a supplement company. That's the thing. Anyone can say, I want to create a supplement, and then they find the manufacturers who will formulate for them. So you can call up a manufacturer, a supplement it's like, basically a private labeler, and say, I want my own supplement. I want to call it chrisbeatcancer supplements, right? And I want you to put turmeric and ginger and boswellia in there for me, and they'll be like, okay, sure, here you go, and they'll bottle it up and put my face on it, right, and then but it's total crap. Like it would be just a garbage supplement because there's no testing on it. But again, I could do this tomorrow if I wanted to, and anyone watching could do this. Right. There's no testing on it. You have no idea where the actual ingredients came from. You don't even know if they're real. They could be completely synthetic, like you said. And this is rampant in the supplement industry.
And we get, for example, a lot of times people who, will take a look at our product and they'll try to be critical about something. And they think, but I'm like, you just private label your products. Like you need to understand from manufacturing all the way through. So when we bilayer it, then there's two other aspects of that. So it's not only bilayered to protect the integrity of the ingredients, but then we have part of it that is lipophilic and part of it that's water soluble. All that means is that our Bosmeric has a 20-minute onset of action and an 8-hour sustained release. So it's a fast-acting, long-lasting product. So just like how people take like an Aleve or a fast ibuprofen or a fast tab, they take it, bam, I have a headache within 20 minutes. Ours has the same thing. Everybody else's takes about 45 minutes to an hour to even get through the digestion. So how we look at, even water soluble, meaning how it absorbs with water into that digestion, and even fats, that's all specifically formulated. So we're not only maintaining ingredients, we're giving you a fast release and a slow release. That's why it took 6 years. So it's not only just finding the right ingredients, it's like, how do we get this to work like that, and then work over time. So most people can take, 1 or 2 in the morning, 1 or 2 in the evening. Cancer patients take 2-3 times a day because we're trying to give 24 hours of lowering inflammation support to them.
So the two layers, what is one layer and then what's the other?
So one layer has the curcumin. You can see that it's the yellow layer. It's kind of a little sweeter when you put it on the tongue. Okay. And the other one is going to have the boswellia and the ginger. They both actually have the black pepper in them. Okay, and then so it's kind of unique, and that's why when it's released as that. So we're one of the very few companies that actually have the bilayering technology because that's pharmaceutical technology. It's expensive, and that's why people say, well, why is the product even expensive? Well, we're using patent ingredients. It's been studied, and we're delivering it like no other product that you can take. Because you can take it. So usually, like when I used to go to conferences, and a lot of times doctors are the most skeptical, by the way. Oh, I have, and most doctors, just like everybody else, back pain, headache, something else on my shoulder, this or that. I say, take this, come back in about 20 minutes and let me know. And the miraculous, they're like, how does this work? Because we've never really had, usually when it comes to natural therapies, they usually say, take this for a couple of weeks and then you'll get better. And most people say, I have a headache now, I have a migraine now, I have colitis now, I have joint pain, I have something right now, I'm flaring, my acne is flaring or whatever, my rash is flaring. What can I do to drop that now? And that's why we run to the pharmacy. But now we're trying to we're making a nutraceuticals. We're taking the natural agents. I always like to look at integrative medicine. What we're doing is we're taking the ancient wisdom, here in this case Ayurvedic medicine, and then using kind of Western pharmacology, biochemistry, and conventional manufacturing, and then merging them together to give the best benefit possible.
And is it accurate to say that Bosmeric is manufactured at pharmaceutical standard?
Yeah, well, it's an ISO 22000 registered. It's an FDA audited and inspected facility. Okay, what that means is that you can always go out to the facility and take a tour. It's quite amazing. You got to gear up. They got pressure sensitive rooms, and it's a building. It's the size of a block that manufactures it. But the thing is, why it's FDA inspected and audited is because when we use products that go into clinical trials, it is treated like a drug. And so no other supplement manufacturer, I mean, probably 95% of what you see on the market is not even FDA inspected and audited. They might be registered. They might just send say, hey, we're a supplement company and there's on a registered database of 10,000 different shops. Okay. Well, there's a level because if you actually went to go inspect those, you'd probably be shocked. Okay. And that's where we want to kick it up a notch because most people have no idea. Again, if I ever get somebody who tries to criticize or investigate the product, I'm like, okay, let's go head to head. Let's take a look at your product and let's look at mine because the goal is really looking at safety, efficacy, purity. But most people, again, when they don't understand manufacturing, have no clue about that.
Well, man, thanks for taking the time to talk about all that because, and I know you talk about it in one chapter of your book.
Right.
And when I read that, I was like,
yeah,
this is insane.
Even when it comes to the excipients, right? Because our product does have excipients, so we'll talk.
Oh yeah,
about
good.
it.
I'm glad you brought that up. Right.
Because so we were talking about that the other day. Someone said, "Hey, what about this little ingredient here?" Well, we have to list since we're at that level of manufacturing. Anytime you put anything into a caplet or a tablet, whether it's a vitamin, a mineral, an herb, or even a pharmaceutical drug, there's certain ingredients that are excipients. Excipients means that they're going to be used in the manufacturing process to compact it to make a tablet hard so it doesn't break as it goes down the machine. It doesn't break when it's in the bottle. That's why when you open a bottle, you can pour it in your hand and it's a nice tablet. It's not crushed powder, okay? But a lot of people will say, well, gosh, it has this little, at the very, very end of the small inert ingredient, it might have this chemical in there.
Right, polyethylene glycol.
Polyethylene glycol, for example. It's on every single caplet and tablet that's manufactured. In fact, some of the natural product companies will just say natural lubricant. Okay? Because just like, for example, when you get a shampoo, it'll say sodium lauryl sulfate, and people go, oh my God, it's horrible. And then they'll say made from coconut, right? Because you can derive all these chemicals from plants, by the way, right? We just go directly to the pharmaceutical name because that's the level that it has to be registered at. We don't just say natural lubricant. We're telling you what that molecule actually is. But for anybody to say that that's not in any product, no, it's not. It's on every product. They just don't disclose it because it's an excipient. It's so small you can't measure it. So most companies don't even tell you. So if I get an organic, whole food, plant-based product, it will still have those ingredients. And if anything is even sustained release, it's definitely going to have those plus more. So the thing is.
So if you don't have to disclose it, why do you?
Why? Because because again, when it's in the clinical trial. When we go to that level of that ISO certification, we have to say anything and everything that touches it, even as it slides down the machine, that we disclose. We're that transparent, right? I mean, we have certificate of analysis. I mean, we have all these things that people have no idea. But when people say, well, yours has that ingredient, I go, well, how is yours even extracted? How do you think they put it together? But again, most people, like you said, Chris, they'll just go say, hey, I want a private label product, and the company's just going to give it to you. You don't ask those questions because you don't even know that was even a question to ask to begin with. So we're on that level of like when you play with the big boys, you gotta be with the big boys. It's like, why? Because we're looking at giving evidence-based medicine. I want to look at using this product in a clinical trial for cancer or a chronic disease. I'm not selling this on Facebook or some kind of funnel marketing kind of thing where there's no data. They're stealing the data, but they're not, at the end of the day, I have to sit in front of a patient and say, are you getting better or not? And that's the difference. These are other people, remember, will take that FDA disclaimer to heart, not intended to prevent, treat, or cure disease. And they stand by that. They say, well, look, if you took it, well, that was your problem. And ours is like, no, we're taking this because these are things that are being recommended by physicians like me.
And that's why I think Dr. Sunil Pai is awesome. And Bosmeric SR is awesome too. Yeah, I mean, it's so refreshing to
scientific, but it's
just refreshing to find someone that has such a high level of not just integrity, but almost like obsession with with efficacy.
It is, and the reason being is because some of these things are kind of more culturally specific to my culture. So when someone's saying turmeric, it's like, well, that kind of goes to Ayurvedic medicine, kind of has this Indian relational background. So when someone says, oh, I took it and I got a rash, then I'm like, well, that's not how that works, and therefore you're not taking. And it gives the whole industry a bad name. We're trying to raise the bar of the natural products industry. And again, it's a wild west since most of it's not regulated on any level. And we want to make sure that, eventually with our product, for example, other like medical clinics, other medical hospitals, for example, are actually recommending the Bosmeric. Why? Because we've gone through all these steps available. So the physician, even the oncologist, can say, I recommend you taking that because the data is there to support the use of that. But what happens is since nobody else goes to that level of that scrutiny, then they're going to say don't take anything because it might potentially cause harm. So that's how we work. That's how we roll, as I say.
Yeah, you're thinking a much bigger picture than just like let's throw a bunch of stuff in a supplement and give it a great sounding name,
Right.
and not disclose all the ingredients on the label and see how many we can sell with hype marketing.
Sure. And at the end of the day, because I think as a provider, we have a specific type of ethics and moral. First, do no harm, and then we have to provide no poisons to anybody. This is the Hippocratic Oath. I take that very seriously, and the goal is really at the end of the day, I have to improve the outcomes. But unfortunately, many people are coming with the right intention, but they're not getting the right outcome. Just like what you're saying, you have to do all these things and investigate and constantly change upon what the new evidence is out there. You have to change and not get too caught up in the fancy marketing. And that's where we're going to teach about at the retreat in Costa Rica. And I also just want to explain, and one of the things that we're also going to do a retreat in Curacao in August. Okay, so if people go to my website, sanjevani.net, SANJEVANI.net, it'll have both. It'll have the Cancer Unplugged Costa Rica with Chris and I, and maybe, I don't know, you might be able to come out. We'll see for August.
I know, it's the first I've heard of it, so
we'll have to talk about that.
Now, I was pronouncing the name of your clinic wrong.
It's Sanjevani.
Sanjevani. I thought it was Sanjevani. I apologize.
It's all right. It's all right. Maybe people eat better if they think Sanjevani.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dr. Pai, thank you for being so generous with your time. And man, it's been really fun.
And I thank you for doing the square one. Thanks for demonstrating eating a plant-based diet and just doing the whole comprehensive approach. Love working with you. And I hope people come out and to the retreat. Hope people read our books and our videos. And
I'll plug it again. Here it is, an Inflammation Nation.
Right.
Absolutely fascinating. If you can't tell, Dr. Pai is a brilliant guy, and even more brilliant in the book. We just barely scratched the surface of his brain power.
Thank you. And you can go to aninflammationnation.com and you can get a book there signed, or you can get it on Amazon, Kindle, and in a few weeks we'll have it on Audible. And maybe one day I'll do a video series on my book.
I think you should.
And I'll have you as my guest.
Awesome.
That will be my honor. Okay?
Sounds great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person
Yes.
in Costa Rica. And everybody, again, check out cancerunplugged.com if you want to learn more about the Costa Rica event. It's April 27th through May 1st, and it's going to be absolutely beautiful event in paradise with just a lot of really awesome people. So come hang out with us.
Come. Great.
Okay. Well, thanks for watching. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube. Subscribe to my blog, chrisbeatcancer.com. I've got a lot of awesome resources for you there, and a lot of healing interviews with people who've healed cancer with nutrition and natural therapies, and tons of information on healing with nutrition. So that's what the blog's all about. If you've never heard of me or seen me before, you should spend some time there. You'll like it. So anyhow, that's it. Thanks again for watching, everybody. See you on the next one.
Thank you.